We're going to work on our guided reading book. See if you can find your little book called Len's Tomatoes. It looks like this. You might have another one for this week too. Some people have The Lemonade Stand. Some people have Amy's Airplane. And I think everybody should have Len's Tomatoes. So if you need to pause the video and go find that story, go ahead and do that. We're going to go through this one together and talk a little bit about what happens in this story. And then the other two stories or other one story that you have is for you to practice your reading on your own. All right, so let's look at our title, Len's Tomatoes. Len is a name, and usually it's a boy's name. It could be short for Leonard, or it could just be a name by itself. And it has an apostrophe S here. That little hook up there is an apostrophe. And that means that the tomatoes belong to Len. They're his tomatoes. This S on the end of the word tomatoes just means that there's more than one tomato. So it's telling me that there's more than one. There could be 10, there could be 20, there could be 50. I don't know how many tomatoes there are, but there's more than one. So the story is going to be about tomatoes that belong to Len. And the picture gives us another clue here that maybe Len is a boy. We're not sure, but I'm using my clues to help me figure it out. And we see there's a plant with tomatoes growing on it. This story was written by Boris Naiman, and the pictures are by Elizabeth Sales. She's the illustrator. We're going to go through and just do a quick picture walk and look at the pictures and get some ideas of what's happening in this story. Here I see two people, maybe a grown-up and a child, maybe Len's mother, I'm not sure. It looks like they are digging a hole and getting ready to put some plants in the ground. They are looking at the plant. It's a small plant. We can see here from what we learned about plants in science, there's a stem, there's some leaves, and it's still kind of small. And there is the boy. He's digging his own hole. And next we see this kind of pole, maybe, and it looks like the plant is next to the pole. When I see a picture like this and I'm not real sure what's going on, it kind of makes me wonder about the story. And I think to myself, I wonder what's going to happen here. So I have some questions. I'm curious about this part of the story because I'm not real sure what's going on. And then I know about this part. He's got a watering can. He's watering his plants. We know that that's important for plants to grow. And we can see that the plants are getting bigger. And here it looks like they're inside looking out a window at their plants. And there I see that there's some tomatoes on the plant. And this is the picture we saw on the cover. The boy is reaching out to grab the tomatoes. And here he is eating a tomato. Okay, so my picture walk there helped me learn a little bit more about the story and what's going to be happening in this story. And it kind of gets my mind ready to read. So I might start thinking of some words that would tell me about a story that's going to happen with a garden or with planting things. I might see the word garden. I might see the word water. I might see the word soil, plant, leaves. All of those are getting ready in my brain because now I have a little bit of an idea of what this story is going to be about. So if I get stuck on a word or I'm not sure of something, I can use those ideas to try to help me figure it out. All right, so let's read together. Len's Tomatoes. Len raced out of the house and into the garden. His mother was planting tomatoes. "May I help?" he asked. "Sure, you can take care of this cherry tomato plant," his mother said. So stop there for a moment. Now we know about the people in our story. We know that this is Len and this is his mother. So we have an idea about some characters. And we also know the setting. We know where they are. They're at a garden that's at their house. Now there's something that you might be wondering about here. It says it's a cherry tomato plant. Cherries are their own things. They grow on trees. Tomatoes are something different. They grow on a plant. But this kind of tomato is called a cherry tomato. So there's all different kinds of tomatoes. Some tomatoes can be as big as like your fist. Some can be really big. Others are small, and they're called, there's a kind called grape tomatoes or cherry tomatoes. And just like they sound, they're about the size of a cherry or a grape. So that's what they are going to be growing, these small cherry tomatoes. Cherry tomatoes are little tomatoes, said his mother. We put cherry tomatoes in our salads last summer. Oh, yes, said Len. I can pop cherry tomatoes in my mouth. Len and his mother worked together in the garden. Len began to dig a hole. He put a plant in the hole. Then he covered the roots with dirt. Now you need to tie the plant to a strong stick, said his mother. Why? Len asked. Tomatoes are heavy. When they get big, they can make the plant tip over, said his mother. So Len tied the plant to a stick. So here we've got a stick, and this answers my question about what was going on in this picture. It's a stick in the ground that's next to the plant. And they gently tie, like with a string or some ribbon, they tie the plant to the stick so that when the tomatoes start to grow, they won't get too heavy and make the plant fall down. Or if it's a windy day, the wind could knock the plants down and then nothing will grow anymore. So the stick is sometimes called a stake. And you'll see it in gardens in some places where the plants are going to get very tall, and that helps them grow tall without falling over. The next day, Len went out to water his plant. Where are my cherry tomatoes? He asked. Len, you have to be patient, his mother said. But Len was not a patient boy. So right away, he wants to know where the tomatoes are. His mother tells him she has to be patient. What does that mean, to be patient? It means you have to be able to wait. So he's not very good at waiting. It says he was not a patient boy. He didn't like to wait for things. Sometimes you have to be patient when you're waiting in line for your turn, or you might have to be patient if your brother or sister is using something that you want to turn with. His mother tells him he has to be patient and wait for the tomatoes to grow. On the third day, Len looked at his plant again. There were still no tomatoes. Every day, Len walked along the garden path and cared for his plant. He made sure it had enough water. Finally, Len saw small green tomatoes. Mom, my plant is sick, he shouted. There's nothing wrong, said Len's mother. All tomatoes start out green. They will turn red when they are ready to eat. We've learned about this with other plants. We've talked about how pumpkins start out green and then they turn orange as they are ready to be picked. Tomatoes do the same thing. When you see a small tomato that is just growing, it will be green. As it gets bigger and the sun shines on it, it will start to turn red. Slowly, the green tomatoes turned red. Len waited until they were bright red. Then he picked his tomatoes. That night, Len made a salad for his mother and father. Len put all of the cherry tomatoes on top, except for one. He popped that tomato in his mouth. Hard work sure could taste sweet. So at the end there, we hear Len thinking that he worked on that garden for a long time. He took good care of his plants, he was patient, and he waited, and now he gets to eat the tomatoes. He loves tomatoes, so he says they taste sweet. But that's what he says at the end, that hard work sure could taste sweet. He worked so hard, and now he gets the reward of eating the tomatoes. All right, when we go to the back pages, it gives us some ideas to do, some things to do about our stories. It shows us the words that we are practicing this week. We are going to talk a little bit about some things that happened in our story and why they happened. So cause and effect here. So at the beginning of our story, we saw that Len was a little upset because there were no tomatoes. The next day that he went out, he planted his plant, and then he went out to check on it. He went inside and told his mom that his plant was sick because there were no tomatoes on it. Why were there no tomatoes? What did his mom tell him? Well, she said they hadn't grown yet. He had to wait. So we can write down the word that she used, be patient. So she told him he had to be patient, or he had to wait for the tomatoes to grow. So if we talk about this, there were no tomatoes. Why? Well, because Len had to be patient. They hadn't had time to grow yet. So then, later on in the story, Len said that there were green tomatoes. Oh, that marker's not working. Maybe this was when he said his plant was sick. There were green tomatoes. Well, why did that happen? Why were all his tomatoes green? Well, it was because they just started to grow. They had not turned red yet. So once again, Len had to wait a little longer. So this time we can just say, wait. The tomatoes needed more time to grow. They needed more sunshine. They were not ready yet. So that was why they were green. They were brand new, and Len had to wait. At the end of the story, Len got to eat the tomatoes. So we can say, eat tomatoes. Why was he eating the tomatoes? Because he had worked so hard to grow them. He worked hard. After he took such good care of his plants and his tomatoes, he was able to get the reward of eating them. He grew those cherry tomatoes and he was able to eat them. Okay, so I would like you to practice this story on your own. Read to someone at your house. Read to yourself. Practice it. If you want to go back with the video and play it again, and you can read along with me, say the words along with me or follow along, that would be great also. That's a good way for you to practice. Also, some of you have Amy's Airplane. This is a book for you to practice on your own. At the back are some ideas, just like in Len's Tomatoes, of things that you could tell about what happens in the story and why does it happen. Some of you have the story The Lemonade Stand. Same thing, practice reading on your own. Go over the words with someone at your house or read to someone. Some of the words might be a little bit hard at first. It's okay, keep trying. And at the back, you can talk about what happens in the story and why does it happen.